Hello, class 12. Today is Monday, and as per the routine, you have English paper 2 or English literature to continue. If you remember our last online class, we had completed a chapter from our story section, uh, the book Echoes, that was Beaver's Worth. Hope you understood the chapter, and we will have to write the note on it very shortly. In that very video, I had also told you about the uh, revised syllabus for this session 2021. Let me again say, one chapter from a story portion, that is to build a fire, is omitted, and one poem from your poetry section, the poem Birches, is omitted. Right, so this is our new syllabus. Please uh, go through the contents of the textbooks again. We already know about the drama The Tempest. It has remained unchanged. That means from Act 1 to Act 5 we were to do, and it has remained the same. And in fact, we have already completed the textbook The Tempest, written by William Shakespeare. Right. Uh, Now there lives only 3 of these stories to complete in this session. Today we'll see one of these stories and try to cover as much as we can, and then we'll step into the poetry section. Right. So today's story, after we have finished Beaver's Worth in our story section, today we'll see a very interesting one, short and sweet, so that you can easily understand through online class. So the story that we take up today is the story of an hour, written by Kate Chopin. So here we go. So it's on page number 53. So see, this is a very nice story written by Kate Chopin. So first of all, let us discuss about the authoress, Kate Chopin, in brief, as it is given in our textbook. Kate Chopin is the pen name of the authoress Catherine O'Flaherty, is her original name. She was an American authoress. She was born in St. Louis, Missouri, in America, on February 8 in the year 1850, and died on August 22 in the year 1904 in St. Louis. She is considered to be one of the first feminist authors of the 20th century, right? So she has been very much, you can say, acclaimed in writing the stories, and she has crafted her stories very finely. She was much influenced by the French author or short story writer Guy de Maupassant, right? And today's story, the story of an hour, was formerly called The Dream of an Hour, which was written in the year 1894, April 19, 1894, by the authoress. But when it got republished, it was republished with the new name, The Story of an Hour, right? So this is an interesting story written by her. So what she is wanting to tell in the story, The Story of an Hour, is she tries to give us the theme that the story, you can say the story deals with the changing perceptions of life, right? What happens when you hear the news, and what is the impact of the hearing of the news, is told in the story of an hour. So it is interestingly written by Kate Chopin. So let us see. It is a short story. So, but we'll try to cover this story in 2 sittings, right? So what we can today, let us carry on. So here we go. The story of an hour, written by Kate Chopin. Knowing that Mrs. Mallard was afflicted with a heart trouble, great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. Right? So the story starts with a person named Mrs. Lucy Mallard. Right? She is a wife, right, to Brentley Mallard, and the opening of the story is with the sad news, as you can see here. So see here, knowing that Mrs. Mallard, Lucy Mallard, was afflicted means troubled with a heart trouble. That means Mrs. Lucy Mallard is a heart weak patient, right? And we know that whoever suffers with a heart problem, they needed great care and attention at home. We have to be very, very careful uh, with any kind of upsetting news to let them know, right? So that is the case with Lucy Mallard, right? So great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. And we receive here that Mrs. Lucy Mallard's husband, Brentley Mallard, met with an accident. It was a train accident, and in this train accident, he lost his life. Right, and the news was brought to her. Right. So when when the news was brought that her husband is now no more, see, he is dead. A great care was taken to deliver this news to her, right, as gently as possible, because she is already a heart weak patient, right? So see, so it was her sister Josephine who told her. So the responsibility of delivering the news to Mrs. Lucy Mallard was given to her younger sister Josephine, right, who brought the news that her husband Brentley Mallard met with an accident, a train accident, and he uh, lost his life. See, in broken sentences. So when Sister Josephine delivered this news to Lucy Mallard, she told the news stammeringly, right? In broken sentences means halting, right? Because this is not a happy news to be delivered at one flow. And on top of that, Mrs. Lucy Mallard is already a heart weak patient, so one needed to be very much gentle enough, soft enough, sensitive enough to deliver this news to her, right? So, however, Sister Josephine um volunteered to deliver this news to her, and she said it stammeringly, right, haltingly. Veiled hints that revealed in half concealing. So veiled means covered hints that revealed in half concealing. So she tried to just give the surface news of her husband, right, though haltingly, so that without having said the complete news, Mrs. Lucy Mallard may understand what is the content of the news. Now see, her husband's friend Richards was there. So her husband's friend Mr. Richards was also there, present there, when Josephine delivered this news to Mrs. Lucy Mallard. Was there too, near her. So he was also standing near her. It was he who had been in the newspaper office when intelligence of the railroad disaster was received. So it was he who had been. So it was Richards who had been there in the newspaper office, right, after the train met with an accident. When intelligence of the railroad disaster was received, right, when the intelligence of the railroad disaster received the news that there was a train accident, right, and thus the people who had their relatives or their known people in the train that met in an accident, they reached to the newspaper office to hear the news, uh, uh, whether their people had been um, injured or killed in the accident or not. So with Brentley Mallard's name leading the list of killed. So when Richards went there to get the news, he saw Brentley Mallard's name at top of the list of being killed in an accident. Right? So it was very sad news for the family. Right? He had only taken the time to assure himself of his truth by a second telegram, and had hastened to forestall any less careful, less tender friend in bearing the sad news. Now see, he had only taken the time to assure himself. So when he heard the news of his friend's death, clear, So it was quite difficult for him to get that news, right? And again, he'll have to take this news to Mrs. Lucy Mallard, right? Who stays with her husband, Brentley Mallard, and perhaps they have no issues so far, right? So see, he had only taken the time to assure himself of his truth by a second telegram. So he wanted the confirmation, right, of the death news. And when the second telegram received, right, it was a confirmed news that Brentley Mallard met with an accident and is killed in the accident, and had hastened, and so he had been very much quick enough to forestall, to guess any less careful, less tender friend in bearing the sad news, right? So it was Richards who was very sad to receive this news, right? But sadder than receiving this news of his friends, Brentley Mallard's death in the accident, it was tough for him to take this news to his wife, Mrs. Lucy Mallard, right? So the responsibility of delivering the news was given to Mrs. Mallard's sister, Josephine. Then see, she did not hear the story as many women have heard the same. With a paralyzed inability to accept its significance, she wept at once. Now see what happened. What was the reaction of the news to Mrs. Lucy Mallard? So she did not hear the story as many women have heard the same, right? So at once, at one flow, I think she understood what was the news being delivered to her. So with the paralyzed inability, she was immobile to hear the news of her husband. Paralyzed, she became like paralyzed. She could not move at all. To accept its significance, to accept the result of what was the news, the outcome of the news, she wept at once. So Mrs. Lucy Mallard cried on hearing this news. After all, it is a news to be cried, right? She cried a whole lot with sudden wild abandonment. Abandonment means to leave, right? In her sister's arm. So she caught hold of her sister, right, Josephine's arms, right, who hugged her on the sad news while delivering, right? She then took leave from there. Mrs. Mallard, after shedding into tears, she then took leave from the arms of Sister Josephine. When the storm of grief had spent itself, she went away to her room alone. So there was about to rain outside, right? Signaling that there would be a heavy rain. Okay, so Mrs. Mallard went to another room, right? And she went there all alone, unaccompanied by her sister Josephine or her husband's friend Richards. She would have no one follow her. She didn't want anybody to follow her. She simply needed herself to be aloof. She simply needed herself to be alone in a room, in a separate room. So she went to a room, lonely. There stood, facing the open window. So when she went inside and locked the door from inside, she took a chair inside the room and she stood out there, right, facing the window, open window. The window was open. A comfortable, roomy armchair. There was a comfortable seating, a chair with the arms, right? Into this she sang. She chose that armchair to sit. She sat there, in that armchair, pressed down by a physical exhaustion that haunted her body and seemed to reach into her soul, right? So she pressed down a physical exhaustion. She became very much tired of God knows, right? What for? That haunted, that visited her body and seemed to reach into her soul. So something entered her body that seemed to be reaching her soul, which was perhaps unknown to her right now, right? She could see in the open square before her house the tops of trees. So looking outside the open window, seated in the armchair, comfortable armchair, she then saw what all those things is a description in this paragraph. See, she could see in the open square, right, before her house, the tops of the trees. She could see the roof, the trees tops, right, that were all acuba with the new spring light, that were all acuba. Acuba means trembling, shaking by the push of the wind, right? The tree tops were shaking. They were trembling by the push of the wind outside. Okay. The delicious breath of rain was in the air, and there was the delicious breath of air. That means, right, she smelt the approaching rain. It is about to rain now, right? She could feel this. The rain is about to shower. In the street below, down below on the street, a peddler was crying his way. She heard, right? A peddler. Peddler is a vendor, right? Who goes and selling his products door to door, right? In the areas. So she could hear a peddler was shouting, okay, out his trade, right? His wares, his goods that he was selling. The notes of a distant song which someone was singing reached her faintly, and there was a song being sung by somebody, right? And that she could hear it in her very sad ears. Just now she has got the news of her husband's death, right? Who met with an accident, right? And now she sat in the armchair and is looking outside the open window, right? She could also hear the song being sung, right, in a far off distance, right? And countless sparrows were twittering in the eaves, and she could also see and hear the sparrows, a group of sparrows, right, were okay, twittering in the eaves. Eaves are the edges of the roof where the sparrows were twittering. Right, so this was the nature outside, right, when she was seated in the room alone, right. There were patches of blue sky swaying here and there through the clouds. So there were patches, right? There were groups of, you know, blue sky, right? Clouds that got gathered and were floating here and there. They were the fluffy white clouds, right? That had met and piled one above the other in the west facing her window. And these clouds, which are white and fluffy, they were okay, floating, and they all met at one place, right? And it is about to rain. It was a signal of a heavy shower. Okay, so this was the picture of the outside view that Mrs. Lucy Mallard, right, viewed, seated herself in the room alone, right, through an open window. Nancy, she sat with her head thrown back upon the cushion of the chair. So she took a comfortable seating, leaning herself completely right now to her back, right? Quite motionless. She did not move, right? She was quiet. She was silent, except when a sob came up into her throat, right? There was only the sound that was coming, that was, right, inside the room. That was her cry, her sob, her sad tears, right, that came time to time in her throat and shook her, right. And as she goes to that story or that news, what she heard, then she is shaken, right, by that news, what she heard. As a child who has cried itself to sleep continues to sob in his dream, right, just like it was a childish act, right, when a child sleeps and the child cries in a dream, or the child cries in the dream, right, viewing the things that the child normally plays when the child is um, right, active, right. Likewise was the action of Mrs. Lucy Mallard, right. She was young. Mrs. Lucy Mallard was a young lady with a fair, calm face. She looked beautiful, right? She was fair complexion. She was whitish in the look. She was a very calm faced lady, right? Whose lines bespoke repression and who had wrinkles even, right? Which bespoke repression. That means that lines were seen on the face that was something by force. It's not by her age that she has become wrinkled, right? Then see, and even a certain strength. But now there was a dull stare in her eyes. But look at the beauty of Mrs. Lucy Mallard. Right now, that is not seen today. Her eyes were dull, right? She had dull eyes. Okay, so how come one would be happy when you hear your husband died, right? So was the case with her, whose gaze was fixed away off yonder on one of those patches of blue sky. So she was looking, she was gazing, right? She was looking, right? Fixed away off yonder. Right? Yonder means over there on one of those patches of the blue sky. She was looking at the white fluffy clouds that were gathering at one place. Okay, it was not a glance of reflection. So it was not a look of reflection. It was not a look of happiness that one takes when you look at the beautiful nature, beautiful sky. right? But rather indicated a suspension of intelligent thought, right? So she was only like feeling a kind of suppressed emotions, right? So she suppressed her emotions, right, within her. That means she tried to control of herself after she heard the news of her husband's death, right? Though quite tough for her, because the person who died, right, um, is um, her life partner, right? So she tried to suppress her emotions within herself, looking outside the nature, but perhaps she was not able to do that. Right? Then see, there was something coming to her, and she was waiting for it fearfully. So there was something that was coming in her soul, that was coming in her heart, right? And she was waiting for it, right? Fearfully, being very much frightened. What was it that was coming to her? What was it? She had a question asked to her. She did not know. Perhaps she had no answer to what that thing that was coming to her. It was too subtle, so it was too simple, right? And elusive to name, and very difficult to find out the name for it, right? What was the thing that was coming to her, right? Soul and mind, right? Soul and heart. So see, but she felt it. But she definitely felt something was coming to her, something was approaching to her, creeping out of the sky, right? Reaching toward her through the sounds, the scents, the color that filled the air, right? Which was drawing closer and closer from the clouds, right, to the open air, right? That filled in the air. So, what was that thing that was approaching to her? Right? She was trying to understand this, suppressing her own emotions on hearing the death of her husband's, right? Brought by Sister Josephine and Richards. Now, see, now her bosom rose, right? Now her bosom rose means she stood quickly bulged. That means she stood confident, right? She took up the courage, okay, and fell tumultuously, and then she felt very much confused on the noise. What was that, right? She was beginning to recognize this thing that was approaching to possess her. So she was trying to understand what was the thing that was coming to her, what was the thing that was approaching to her, right? She was trying to recognize it, though she was not able to name it. What was that? And she was striving to beat it back with her will, and she was trying to fight with her might, with her power, right? She was striving, she was struggling, right, to overcome it. What was the thing that was coming to her? As powerless as her two white, slender hands would have been, right? So she was a beautiful lady, a gentle lady with soft, right, Cinderella's hands, right? So see, when she abandoned herself, a little whispered word escaped her slightly parted lips. Now see, so when she was trying to understand, right, when she abandoned herself, when she left herself, a little whisper, right, something she said in a soft voice, over word escaped her slightly parted lips, and she was trying to pronounce that word. What was that that was approaching to her? She said it over and over, and she told this in whisper over and over. That means now and then, again and again, right? Under her breath, and she used only her breath to say that. And what was that she said? She said, free, 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 right? So the very thing that was approaching to her, her soul and mind and heart, that was free, right? The freedom she got after, right, her husband is dead. Now see, the vacant stare. So she was looking, right, emptily, right, and the look of terror, and there was a look of, right, a frightenedness as well, that had followed it when from her eyes. They stayed keen and bright. Her pulses beat fast, and the coursing blood warmed and relaxed every inch of her body. Now see, right? Her pulse rate right now increased. The heart beat was faster, right? When she got the word that is free, right? And the coursing blood warmed, and the blood that was running in her veins got warm, right? Which was little bit earlier, very cold, because she has heard the news of her husband's death, and relaxed every inch of her body, and she began to feel relaxed every portion of her body when she got that word free, which means freedom. after she is going to get, right, after the demise of her husband. Okay, so this is the poster what is happening in the story so far. So you notice here that, right, the opening of the story of an hour written by Kate Chopin. Okay, now what happens thereafter when she realized that she is going to get, right, free life, right, after the death of her husband. So we'll keep it up to here, and in our second sitting, okay, I think we'll be over with the story. So what happens and how the story ends, we'll again see it in our next class. Thank you very much.